Hello, everyone. I hope everyone had a wonderful week. Um, this week has been a very interesting week. I got my daughter back on Friday. That was exciting. It always is when one of your children comes home. She was a little bit overset when she came home, and I wasn't surprised that she missed all of her home things. She's not used to sharing a room, for instance. And I thought it was interesting that she's now taking more in her stride. So that's how my week went, and I worked a lot. So, like everybody, the economy is making sure that we spend even less time at home and more time going crazy over how we're going to make it work. Okay, so this week we are going to pay a big tribute to the end of the RoboDebt saga. If you haven't been following how big an event, sorry, how big of an event the RoboDebt saga was for a lot of families. Consider that there are over 2,000 deaths, and they're just the ones that we know of. For instance, a lot of people don't leave this um, big message moment. You know, it's a very personal thing, financial ruin. So I'm not surprised to hear that it's way worse than what we all thought. We're going to discuss The Voice. I've got to pull that up first. I'm still in the throes of getting everything done. We're going to talk about an LNP senator that was dumped. Um, we're going to talk about PEDA CREDLIN, the former advisor to Tony Abbott. Then we're going to discuss The Voice and Tony Abbott, and then how the LNP could lose further. So let's start off. So there is a by-election coming up. I think it's next weekend, the one for the seat of Fadden. If you don't know, Stuart Roberts is essentially resigning as a result of the RoboDebt saga, amongst many other controversies that he had. If you don't know this, every despicable LNP person has very similar through lines to the things that Stuart Roberts did. Do not assume that Stuart Roberts is the outlier. Consider him the norm, not the outlier, when making these thoughts known on LNP MPs, particularly in the front bench. I mean, you had a prime minister so despicable that he thought having secret ministries was the norm. You know, there was a lot of discussion about that. I'm not surprised that Stuart Roberts is one of many that I've found many controversial moments with. But here's what intrigues me: the insider's view. That's just given me a brilliant idea. So what that's going to mean is, what will happen is, in the lead up to all of this, what the approach of the media, there's something I wanted to add here. Just give me a tiny ticket and I will find it. And now I can't believe I didn't even think to have it. Okay, so where would that be? I wanted to start off a little bit better, but turns out I won't be able to find it in time. No, I'm not going to be able to find it, am I? Sorry, it's got to be just here. And if it is, I will be ecstatic if I can find it. It's not going to be, so I have to give up that whole avenue. So as they're talking about the by-election, I want to keep you in mind of this. I can't believe I can't find it. Insiders interviewed the opposition so much that it's almost crazy. Like when you think about the way that the LNP is given precedent over all of this, they even at one point inferred that, I'm sure it's here in one of them, it has to be. They even inferred that there was no way that they wouldn't be the winners, kind of thing. They even sort of put it out there that that's part of how it should have been handled. Like it should have just been, oh, here it is. I think, okay, here it is. I found it. I knew I had it there and I just couldn't find it. So the ABC is being impartial to the opposition, essentially, and not doing fair play, fair run, which I don't want it to be a leftist or a right thing. I just want it to do the right thing. And I think that that's fundamentally going to be something that we're going to need to discuss down the line. Why isn't it? And whose fault is that? Particularly when discussions over ROBO debt, they only have time to mention a Liberal candidate in the upcoming Fadden election. They also did that in the Ashton by-election. But here's where this thing gets interesting. Okay, so I thought I would show you this. I thought I was a little bit more organised, but no, of course not. Why would I have been organised? Okay. Anthony Albanese puts it out there really, really quickly, you know, that robo debt was never ever about the government, like it was about the people and the victims and the government of the day and how they treated it. And it wasn't about political point scoring. It wasn't to make it a football. It was to make it real so we could see the turmoil that it created. So let's have a look at what Albo said in
thought, given that Peter Dutton sat in the cabinet for all of that time, sat in the parliament for all of that time and since, and defended this system, that the Royal Commission could have seen some recognition from Peter Dutton that this isn't about politics, it's about people. There could have been a hint of empathy from Peter Dutton, but there was none. A refusal.
See at the bottom banner, Peter Dutton accuses the government of politicising report. Like even in that wording, as Albo saying, hey, this isn't about kicking a football, that's blatant. It's outrageous. because that gives it credence as if that's really what went on here. It's disgraceful. ABC should be embarrassed of this.
To
It
even
gets
say
worse.
that anything wrong happened here, in spite of the very clear evidence in a report that is almost 1,000 pages long, that documents the human impact of taking humans out of human services. I would have thought.
Now, there are several things that I have wrong with this. One is that Peter Dutton was given sort of 10 minutes of undisputable time to attack the government over RoboDebt, as if attacking ALP is the reason that they're all standing there, not the reason RoboDebt actually came about because of their negligence. The very fact that the ABC gave that any hint of a glow should have made people angry. And the reason that should have made people angry is this. You need to know fundamentally why we were listening to every morsel of evidence. Every morsel of evidence meant something to the 30,000 foot view of how damning it was. That this didn't just understand that there were 2,000 lives, over 2,000 lives that were lost. Let's discuss the homelessness and the separation of families that it created. This wasn't just a one-tiered hit, you're done in one. Or we're not even going to discuss the ongoing impact of having something like that thrust upon you. This is incredible that we're even, or the fact that there had to be a court finding not only was it that it was illegal, but some of these victims in a class action lawsuit, which Bill Shorten took to the people and made sure that they were compensated back. That's where we're at. But they're not done with this. So Peter Dutton, instead of going, no, this is how bad, we own it, you have the ABC letting him go on about how, well, Albo's making it about, just attacking us. At no point was that the point. It was never stressed like that at all, but it doesn't matter. The facts don't matter when they're not being pushed back upon. And that is where the ABC has failed this RoboDebt saga into what will be known as the disgusting version of what we let be said about this. He didn't mention the victims. He didn't mention how he would never do it again. Oh, no. This was more about making sure the community heard Albo shouldn't be politicizing this. Are you freaking kidding me? You should be mad that happened. So now that I've got there, this isn't the only mistake that they made. Check this out. The ABC is proving itself to be quite incompetent and partisan. PM Albanese is not the opposition leader. Peter Dutton is. And then the factually incorrect claim the opposition leader Peter Dutton accuses, as if that has some credibility. But then they have him on so often that they can't even put Albo's name up there. So as we're going to discuss this RoboDebt saga, let's get something abundantly clear. This was handled poorly. There are a lot of media organizations. I mean, we're always going to ignore the fact that Ida Buttrose vehemently defended the LNP right up until the very end. It's not even shocking anymore. They can't hide their political persuasion for all that blustering of, oh, it's a leftist show, when it never was. But the moment it gets to hardcore right ideology, everyone clamps down and then tries to defend that. No, you can't. It's always accuse your opponent of what you're about to do. The ABC was not politicized at all. It would attack both sides of government. But the LNP were always like, we shouldn't fund this. It's a leftist show. In other words, they were giving the game away. They told you outwardly what they were going to do. So do not be shocked when you hear what they did was this. They made it theirs. And they drove away good viewers that viewed factual content, whether it attacked the ALP, LNP, One Nation, Independence, Teals, whether it praised them. You know, that's got to be the most laughable part of this, is that the left ever had a chance. I mean, we are that stupid as a society that we have not woken up to the idea that they've slowly just crept it all up on us, and that this is what we're going to accept as normal. This is normal. In our media, it's totally normal to be right-wing nut jobs that control all of this crap, and we're supposed to listen to the diatribe that they put out there. Like, that's all normal. You wouldn't dispute walking past a Courier Mail newspaper. Like, how many people openly know that that's lying to you? We have accepted that as the norm. And this was no normal Royal Commission, I might add. This is something that where they even took it out there like this was originally ALP's idea. There was barely a fact check on the fact that it was never intended for this level of cruelty. And that's exactly what this program was. It was a level of cruelty that never should have been thrust upon the public. Do you know, I did receive a nearly $12,000 debt. It was right at the start, like right at the start, before they got really bad with it. And I had records. I don't know if you can see too much in my office, but I keep everything way longer than the standard 7 years. Some might call me a hoarder. Others call it, I got off a nearly $13,000 debt because I knew my stuff. And it was interesting that my husband wasn't named on any of it. It was just my name. They didn't even think to add him. So that I found interesting, and that it was a debt apparently incurred before I was married or even an adult. So I was like, you really reach back into some of those things. That's when they started the averaging from before I turned 18. I'm 40 now, but at the time in 2016, no, 40, I think it was 2016 or 15, I received one of those letters. So, yeah. So they reached way, 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 way back. Right up until well into my married life. That's what they were claiming. And that's where they got this really high number from. For when I was studying. And I was like, I didn't even have a job. Are you going to go with your overpaid a student? I had bank receipts. Like, I had bank receipts, and then I had all these other papers like tax papers I had from other jobs before that. I had all of my notes put together from Centrelink, every letter. And I had this big silver folder. I walked in there and I put it down in some organized fashion. And for everything that I came out with, I am not I'm not good at literacy, but I had like little notes on each thing that was like, here's where we went wrong. And I was prepared to counter everything that they had. Some people aren't so lucky to be able to keep all of that stuff. But I did, because I knew what I was looking at was big, and I would never ever have the money to go paying something that big off. So the lady, within 2 days of working through all the paperwork, I handed over. And I mean, even for Centrelink, this was copious amounts of paper. I mean, like, I paper bombed them, and it was an excruciating 2 days of. By the Wednesday, I started on a Monday. By the Wednesday, the employee was like, "This is, I've never experienced this with any other client." I have to say that they really earned their money in those moments with just handling my case. After that, I heard that they stopped putting the phone number even down. And then they stopped helping people with robo debts. Appalling. I remember I was so distressed, I couldn't even look after my children. I would have them dropped off in between everything that I was doing, and I would take them somewhere and then say, oh no, this is too big for them to see me lose it. That's how big the robo debt did affect me. It really did. It was such an impacting moment. I remember feeling scared and that I couldn't breathe. I was looking at a debt of 13,000 with one small child at the time, and that I was trying to help out my eldest. My littlest hadn't really 20. Yeah, she would have been about really little, so I wouldn't have had to explain. My eldest knew, though. He knew that I wasn't coping with it. I would drop him off with family, and I'd say, I really, really can't breathe with this debt looming over me. And that was a really, really difficult thing. People lost their lives, and the media can't even do anything decent. They have to not even know how to put the person that they're talking to. They call Anthony Albanese the opposition leader, and then they call him Peter Dutton. This wasn't their only mess. They have made repeated messes of this. This was no small saga. This was, from a person that did receive one of these letters, it was devastating. I remember thinking, if these people don't believe that I don't owe this money, I'm ruined. There's no way that you could go it would take me like a decade to even get to close to where I wanted to be. And that would just be paying off that. That would have meant nothing for my children. I think about it now, and if my husband had been as persistent as he was about me cleaning up my office space and won, I wouldn't have had all that evidence. That's not to say he wasn't right. I do have issues with paperwork, but in this case, it saved us thousands of dollars. Like, even he was like a little bit surprised at how organized I was in obtaining all those details. I had little sticky notes all over the place, and I was like, I'm going to prove I don't owe a cent. No, not many people had as much time dedicated to what I did. There were papers scattered all over my office, and I pulled everything apart. And Peter was like, the kids have got to eat and stuff. You know, I become that engrossed that he'd have to come and remind me that I hadn't spent any time doing anything else. The house, in that 3-day moment, the house had sort of turned into this bomb hitting moment. Everything halted. I looked at that letter and I just stopped. My whole world just stopped. I stopped everything and I was like, no, I'm going to do this. And that's how it was for me. That would have happened like this to so many people. So the LNP's response to this was appalling. To know how it felt to receive one of those letters, and then to have the media's response to how severe this thing was. No, I do not think that this is something that they ever intended to take seriously. For several reasons, I don't think that they're interested in doing the right thing to the victims of this. But let's have a look at Scott Morrison's response. So there is this moment where Scott Morrison discusses how he handled the saga. And I mean, this is another bright beacon moment where he should have been alarmed. This was essentially his little bubble thought, like his immigration thought. He thinks the cruelest thing you can do, and then goes, no. I'm going to be the one to personally enact that. And then when it goes badly, we'll blame staff. Because of course you would, because accountability is not his deal. So listen to how he responds to just how despicable of a situation this was. And it was despicable. So let's take a listen to that.
But it is a difficult system.
I think you were actually asked about directions or guidance to Ms. Campbell.
Happy to respond.
Well, go right ahead. But it is necessary to listen to the question and just answer it without extra detail, unnecessary detail, if you could.
Commission.
Thank you. Oh, please don't give us an example. I don't think it will assist.
I'm happy to, if I misunderstood your question, I apologise, but what I understood your question to be...
Let's not go there.
Well, it helps me answer your question.
No, you'll be answering something you've assumed I've asked.
Okay,
it's
well...
better that I ask it again, Mr. Morrison.
Let's go again.
Mr. Morrison, you can't advert in this commission to documents which were before Parliament. That's not the Commission's doing. That's the subject of Parliament's own legislation. And one might have thought that as a parliamentarian, you'd appreciate the significance of parliamentary privilege.
What then may assist, Commissioner, if I may?
No, you may not, Mr. Morrison. Would you look at these documents and tell me if that's what you've been talking about?
And this based on her evidence, because I was unaware.
Oh, look, could we just have your evidence, Mr. Morrison? Never mind Ms. Wilson's evidence. Just answer the question, if you could.
Yes, that may not be my question, though. My question is...
And that's how he treated the whole thing. This wasn't even like he was going to take it seriously. He didn't actually directly answer any questions. I realized that there was a lot of things cut off there, like of actual answers, but there's a reason for that, because he didn't actually answer. That's essentially the breakdown of, oh, we asked you a question and we expect you to answer that question, not come up with us with another question and then tell you what my thoughts were. No. The commission was looking for evidence, and they asked him about pieces of evidence. You know what their response was? Well, this is how we see it. No, that's not what they asked you. They didn't ask you about how you seen it. They asked you about how the Parliament viewed the laws, what it meant. That's an important factor. That's what's going to keep coming up. But as it goes along, you're realizing, nah, it was never ever going to be taken seriously. And his whole premise was based upon a whole bunch of falsehoods of, well, maybe I assumed it to be like this, maybe I didn't. But then Media Watch did this. This is the one saving grace in the whole shameful saga. Okay.
But now, to a remarkable story about political spin and media management, exposed for all the world to see.
The secrets of spin doctors for the former coalition government have been exposed at the Royal Commission into the bungled ROBO debt scheme. In testimony today, a former senior media advisor gave evidence that right-wing media outlets were fed information to discredit claims coming from victims.
So this wasn't just right-wing newspapers that did this. The ABC were well documented even up to yesterday to sort of let Peter Dutton run the narrative rather than the facts. They let Peter Dutton make it about whether it was a political football rather than his government's role in it, which is a misdirection at best. At worst, it shows how cold and calculating he is. But what makes what Peter Dutton did even worse is that the media let him do it. Like, it's what we know what the LNP is. We know that they're despicable. But it's another thing to hand him the mic and then not rebut it. And that's essentially what happened.
Well, well, well. That may be no great surprise to political and media insiders, but it's almost unheard of for a former spin doctor to reveal the dirty detail of how governments warp the news. Rochelle Miller, of course, has played whistleblower before on a more personal matter. On Four Corners in 2020, she dished the dirt on sexism and bullying in Parliament and revealed a consensual affair with Human Services Minister Alan Tudge, who was in charge of the robo-debt scheme. Last week, she revealed to the Royal Commission her role in pushing the policy.
It was Rochelle Miller's job to help promote the robo-debt scheme.
I took one look at it and went, there's a good story here.
In the government's view, there certainly was. Punishing welfare cheats and clawing back what they don't deserve with an automated system that cost little to taxpayers. But who could tell the story? Miller picked out Sarah Martin from The Australian.
So she got what we call a drop or an exclusive from us to run the story. That was a common practice. Rather than just sending out a media release and hoping that a journalist might just pick it up, you then take away the exclusive. If it's an exclusive, it's more likely to end up on the front page.
What they did is that they found details about victims and they tried to shame him into shutting up because they knew it was disgusting. They knew it was illegal. So they thought, hey, this looks bad. So let's shame the victims into just not saying anything. And that's where this adds an extra nail to this coffin. So while Peter Dutton can stand there and pretend like this is some sort of political game that he's being attacked for, let's be realistic about it. No, this is accountability time. The Royal Commission was set and lined up and made sure that we heard exactly what they did and why they did it. This was not a game. This isn't a tit for tat thing. This is lives on the line. The only people playing games was the LNP with yours. And they're not done doing it. Do not think that they're not going to reheat this. I'm going to show you that again soon too.
And did it work? You bet. Splashed as an exclusive across page 1.
$4.5 million in overpayments found every day as 20,000 people a week caught in crackdown.
Now the story was out there, other media came knocking. That night, Nine's A Current Affair, which has always loved a dull bludger, gave the minister a pulpit.
The government says they've got a new high...
Now, this used to be a really reputable source. If you remember, Current Affair used to do real media. And then something happened. The moment that Peter Costello got his little grubby hands all over it, it turned into this. It turned into, well, we can now spin it pro-coalition. And that's exactly what happened. And they were more than happy to be on board to do exactly that. Now, listen to this little tidbit.
High-tech system that's helping catch out the cheats who've been stealing from the taxpayer.
We will find you, we will track you down.
And that's interesting. He's putting it out there. We'll find you, we'll track you down, and they will put you in prison possibly for it. So they were threatening people with prison. So they just weren't shaming people to the whoever exposed what they were doing by going
and you will
to
have to repay those debts, and you may end up in prison.
They weren't just going to the government, to the media, and then saying, this is all the information that we've got on them. So they were threatening them on multiple levels. So not only did this create homelessness, massive debt, and lives, but they weren't done. They were openly threatening people. And then the media was helping them do it. We'll just help them, be the mob for them. This was disgusting. How did this sort of just get out of control like this? And then you had Peter Dutton yesterday come up and then go, oh, ALP's politicizing this. Are you kidding me? I was murderous. At this point, I was like, once I played it back, I thought, oh, I'm coming for blood. You've gone too far. I've received one of these letters. You horrible, despicable human.
So far, so good. But there was a hitch. The Guardian and others began to uncover worrying problems with the system.
Centrelink officer says only a fraction of deaths in welfare crackdown are genuine.
So was the minister worried? Well, not at first.
We weren't too concerned because it wasn't unusual that the left-wing media were attacking us regarding social policy.
At which point the commissioner asked who exactly was in that left-wing club.
So hold on. Let's keep in mind Rochelle Miller was having an affair with Alan Tudge. She was the media advisor. But remember, they had people on the inside like Vicky Campion and others, like Barnaby Joyce's mistress. At that time, they had like insider views. It was like right in there from the 30,000 feet view, you could see this. You could see how this was being put out there like, no, don't feel sorry for the victims. Feel sorry for us that we have to track them down and make them our victims. That's essentially how it was put out there. And that should have you fuming. That at every angle, it didn't give people a way out. They took off the phone number to be able to even call Centrelink to dispute it. They even admitted to making it harder for people to dispute the debts. They even admitted in this whole thing that they were making it so the Centrelink workers were not encouraged to help people resolve them. So tell me again how ALP is the big bad guy for telling you how, for having this Royal Commission into it. That has to be the most disgusting angle that we've had to deal with in all of this. Not only does that discredit the victims, it discredits the families of those victims, and it doesn't make sure... Let me be very clear about this. It makes sure that they can reheat this, and they're going to, and I'm going to show you that they do want to.
Club.
Where does the ABC fit in all this?
I would have said that they were in the left-wing media camp.
Where was the Sydney Morning Herald in your spectrum?
Left-wing media.
The Guardian and the Saturday paper were also on the left-wing list who could be ignored. Except the criticism did not go away. In late December, the ABC reported
there are growing calls for Centrelink to halt its new automated compliance system after a number of citizens reported being issued incorrect debt notices.
And in January, powerfully negative stories were ramping up in the Nine papers too, documenting Centrelink's litany of inhuman errors and warning.
Oh, I did forget. I do, now that I've seen his face, Andrew Wilkie does need to be awarded for some of this. He was the one who also spoke about the inquiry and what he wanted done. As much work as Bill Shorten did, Andrew Wilkie was speaking to a lot of these victims. Keep that in mind. And Tony Windsor, he was talking to a lot of victims. Like, this was not done in a small little light. This was being blown up big. I remember Bill Shorten physically going to victims, like traveling around the country to make sure he understood how big this thing was. He helped people resolve their debts. And then he went on to do the class action lawsuit. This was no small thing that happened here. They understood the gravity of how big this thing was. I think that this is one of the biggest abuses of government that we've seen since we allowed more people to vote, but since before more people were allowed to vote. There was like a rule that if you weren't a landholder or a man, you couldn't vote. This was back to like the good old days of how they had things. This was deeply unfair, and we've always treated the homeless and the poor terribly, but this was so much worse. I'm amazed at how shockingly this was underreported.
Warning of victims on the edge of suicide. Now concern was rising. The minister returned from holidays to deal with the crisis. As Miller recalled,
he was very firm with me that I needed to shut this story down.
And how did they do that? Cue more dark arts.
Hold on. Instead of being accountable, at this point, they well and truly knew it was illegal. So by this, they were trying to skew the legal advice because they knew there was no way that they could clear this as legal. So by now, if you know that you've acted with bad faith merits, and I think every step along the way they knew, the legal advice was clear not to do this. But now they've made their bed. And instead of saying, no, my bad, we did something that we shouldn't have, here's how we fix it. That would have been the best angle here. That would have buried the story the quickest. And I'm not saying that it ever should have been buried. I'm saying what they did was blow it up 3 times bigger. Because what they did to victims then, you couldn't ignore it. It became like a sound so big, a big wave of people just going, enough. You've harmed too big this time. And I think that always happens to the LNP. It's almost like they will do something and then it's like, well, I've come this far. Let's shoot myself in the foot and then see how it all blows up spectacularly in my face. That's how Conservative kind of operate. And they don't learn from it. They make that same mistake repeatedly. Because I'm going to show you again how they're still going to keep doing this.
Involved, placing stories with the, the more friendly media, the right-wing media, about how the coalition was actually catching people who were cheating the welfare system.
More friendly journalists were needed for this, and Miller knew who to call and how to direct them.
You worked with them and provided them with the information which would enable the story.
Yes.
How would it have been legal to leak victims' information? See, that also needs to be criminally prosecuted. The victim's information was handed over. So every time you hand your information to Centrelink, that should just remain within Centrelink. What they did was uncover those victims' details. Surely there's legal argument and precedent there to prosecute them for doing that. And any media outlet that allowed that to be published, that there is not freedom in media to do this, to know that you have secret information and to do what they did, to knowingly harm another person. I think there's more to this. There's got to be. It was too big not to.
To be written in a way that the minister liked,
Yes.
or at least presented in a way that the minister liked.
Yes. And Simon Benson was very good at doing that.
Simon Benson is the very good political reporter for The Australian, who delivered another ripping front-page splash for the government.
Centrelink victims owe thousands.
Debt scare backfires on Labor. Exclusive.
And Benson helpfully included the talking points and case studies supplied by the minister's office. Another bullseye. And Miller had friends in other newsrooms too.
All of the tabloids, The Australian, and some of the commercial television channel.
Do you hear how they do it? See, here's something that she's not owning up to, and they have before in the US. Rupert Murdoch essentially has admitted to running the story of the day. In other words, he sets how that story is going to be relayed all day long. And then it hits a crescendo. And then when he admit this will come out in the whole Fox being sued over the whole Dominion thing. They said how it was going to be done. Years ago, he even admitted to making kings and queens out of, countries, like essentially saying, I make the prime minister and the presidents. So it isn't as if we weren't already like shrouded in this whole idea. I don't think the LNP or any Conservative would ever win without Rupert Murdoch. I think that he was like an extra part, an extra element, because he would put it out there on social media, and then he would help the media on social media go that way, and then he would flood all the airwaves, like in radio. A lot of people were listening to radio at first too, and then he'd do print media, and then he'd do news. So piece by piece by piece, he was winning. And that's how he was making terrible prime ministers and presidents. Year after year. I don't even think, I'm going to be honest, I don't like it. I think that we should have had Bill Shorten. I think that we should have had Bernie Sanders in the US. I think the same thing for other countries. I don't think Macron was the best choice. And I think a lot of people are looking at that now. There were a lot of, better leftists that you could have gotten that would have achieved a way bigger goal. But it was presented like if we were handed that better leader, that was the bad thing. That's what makes this so destructive in the robo-debt saga. We were handed this like they had no choice. Like any better choice, you'd be getting too much, and we've been too nice to these people. It's almost like we should thank them for giving us incompetent idiots. And this is all the norm. That's how it was presented. Robo-debt wasn't just presented as something that we should be thankful for. Like they were getting back millions of dollars in government money. It was outrageous. And now they admit they're bad. And the LNP won't. But through the Royal Commission, we've heard what roles they played. And Peter Dutton gets to stand there and then go, oh, well, ALP are using it as a political football. After hearing that they use the media like that. And they just let it all glide by. Like, that's normal. It's not. And none of this is normal. It's like living in a weird universe.
Plus, Plus, Sky News and 2GB, Miller said. And what was the nastiest trick of all? Leaking the personal details of supposed welfare routers to the media, which had just the effect the minister wanted.
Did you notice any impact of the decision to release personal information into the media upon the nature of media stories from that point?
Yes.
And what was the impact you observed?
Well, there were less people speaking out in the media, which was the intention.
It was a brilliant political strategy until it wasn't, because eventually the harm wreaked by the robo-debt policy could no longer be denied. A federal court judge called robo-debt a shameful chapter and a massive failure of public administration. It was shameful for the coalition government, its ministers and their minders, but also, in my view, for many in the media who were used by the government to run propaganda and discredit victims. And now they've been exposed.
Yeah, no, but I don't think it's that simple. I think the media wanted to be used. I think they wanted the Conservative government. I think that we have been denied a decent hearing on anything. We aren't given the opportunity of the freedom of choice. We're handed what they wanted us to choose right from that outset. Otherwise, robo-debt would not have gotten as far as it did. I don't think any Conservative government would have gone as far as what they did. I don't think John Howard would have been the leader for 10 bloody years if we got the media that we deserve rather than what we have. There is a lot of harm in this, and this I got to tell you, in them 10 years that John Howard was running the show, he was terrible, but I didn't think it could get worse. Everything from Abbott to Malcolm Turnbull to Scott Morrison, it was so much worse than I could possibly imagine. And they were, I think, way back when John Howard was leading the nation, they were learning how to do it. They were finessing how to be cruel and horrible. Like, think about the immigration talks and how they persuaded the public into thinking, oh no, we should treat people that are trying to flee awful situations terribly because you know they might be bad people, without double checking at all if they were, you know, okay or even you know taking care of the children or anything. We were given the story of, oh, they've got to be bad people, they're fleeing. I cannot articulate the amount of frustration that comes with this, because it treats people as if they're not people, as if they're not victims of what happened here. And because of the media, we have been spun this whole thing out like this is normal. No, that's not normal. It's not normal to attack a person seeking help, whether that's a robo-debt or an immigrant or poor. We shouldn't have these issues, but worse, we shouldn't attack them for having any issue. It just shouldn't be done. You know, people haven't realized how cruel it really is. Well, how normal we've made that sound. Robo-debt kind of woke me up as to how cruel a government can be, and then deflect and then say, well, don't be mad at me, be mad at the opposition for pointing it out. And you're like, you're going to buy that? That's normal? Like, or don't be mad at me that I didn't want the immigrants to come, because it's the immigrants' fault for wanting to come. It took the breath out from my lungs. I just couldn't breathe, thinking that these people were treated so horribly. But it gets, let me show you how much worse it could have been. There's more. Tonight it's going to go a little bit over time, and I know it will, but listen to this and how nefarious the whole thing was.
The government lied, and the government stole money from them. Hi, I'm Rick Morton and I'm the senior reporter with the Saturday paper. We're going to do things a little bit differently this week on the podcast. We're doing a RoboDebt special.
Does not say that at all. So my view may well be wrong.
The fact is you've got to comply with the law. It's basic. It simply wasn't in my mind.
Misrepresent things to the Australian public.
We put a lot of work into this because the RoboDebt Royal Commission is one of the most significant inquiries of the last 3 decades in Australia. And I knew that we needed to drill into the detail to figure out what it says, but also what it means. And to do that, we needed to talk to a few people. And I think it's going to help you, as well as us, understand the big seismic shifts that are coming out of this report. And it's about the way power is delivered in Australia, the way people in poverty are made to administer their own poverty, as Darren O'Donovan says. But also, how little people can fight back with a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of information against the biggest force there is in this country, which is the government. This week, we're going to give that story as much of a voice as we can. And I think it's going to have huge implications for the future, not only of government and the public service, but also how we talk about each other, and certainly how we listen to stories where people have been affected by the decisions of government. Because I think what RoboDebt taught us very early on, and it's one of the hardest lessons to learn, is that sometimes you need to listen to people and bear witness to what they're saying, because they might be right. And certainly, finally, we have an answer in this case, and that they were right. They were telling the truth. The government lied, and the government stole money from them.
So that's the Saturday paper. Understand that I'm going to be bringing you what they're exposing, because it's that big. This doesn't end here. These people's lives were destroyed. There wasn't like a recourse they could just take. No one was listening. I cannot stress that this was so much more than just taking money off people. They were made homeless. People lost their children. I've never seen anything like this. I didn't know government could. I knew that they could be cruel. I've seen cruelty, but this went way bit. I've heard of overseas things where in the US they have this system of only awarding you unemployment for 8 weeks. And then they just cut you off in some states, and they're like, oh, well, you're not our problem anymore. If you're, homeless and don't have your children, that's on that's on you. And the weird thing is that they will vote for that person that does that time and time again. But I always thought, stupidly, that won't happen here. We're protected from that kind of thing. Turns out, no, not at all. We were right in the thick of it. And I think Rupert Murdoch made it sound normal. And he spun it to us like this is just the way life is. If you're homeless, we should be kicking you down, to another suburb so we can't see you. They're not disturbed that there's homeless people. They're disturbed that they have to view that they're there. It's awful. It's really, truly awful. And I don't think that there'll ever be a moment we should breathe comfortably in this whole thing. We should all feel unsettled and a little bit rattled. The people were truly harmed in such an abhorrent way, and that we stole something that we can never get back, our humanity. As a country, we lost our humanity. And that's what's going to bring me to show you this. Then you've got PEDA CREDLIN. Now, this is another extra element to it. She was Tony Abbott's advisor. So what credentials did she have to do this? None, but it doesn't matter. They gave her a job anyway, because Conservatives can always get jobs doing things that they're not qualified for really doing. They don't have to tell you the truth. They just have to tell you their truth. Okay, now take a look at this. They're not done with this RoboDebt saga. That's what she's doing. Yeah. So she is trying to As if this didn't already look bad for him. She's trying to find a way back to it. Why? Because while you're hating on someone that can't get out of their situation, you're not looking at how truly despicable they are. That's what their goal is here. It's not so, ask an LNP person their policy. No, truly, I've done this. Ask them their true policy. It's anti-immigration, it's anti-women, it's anti-anyone that might be LGBTIQ. And they can put on the pretty little thing and then say, we're not really that bad. We're not like the US. But ask them. Ask him what Stuart Roberts was printing out of his little printer with his little old mum on those communities. Ask Scott Morrison what he did to immigrants. See, when you ask him about policy, this is who they are, this. And she's at the heart of it. I don't think they ever run the country. I think there's little pieces behind him of Rupert Murdoch's little cockroaches like her that sit behind it and set the policy. The guy who doesn't pay any tax would tell you, no, attack the immigrant. He's an immigrant in the US. No, attack the poor people. But I won't pay any tax to make sure that they're taken care of. You know, it's disheartening. She's not done though. This is another one that she decided to put it out there. The moment she got even a sliver of pushback, here's what she did. She went with, well, I told you something you didn't like to hear, so here's what I did. I'm going to tell you that I'm being censored because you didn't want to hear that I'm saying horrible things to people. This is incredible. It's a slow walk to our own demise. That's what this is. This kills our humanity. We aren't human if we accept this as the norm. Truly, we are not human if we accept her narrative. I'm done playing nice with these people. Hell yeah, they're out of government, but don't think that we're smart enough to keep them out. And we have to apply pressure to this government to make sure this can't happen again. We need to make sure that that Royal Commission happens into Rupert Murdoch. We need to be calling as many ministers as we can to go, nah, it's pure evil. I don't care if Albo's scared. Let me tell you, there's a hell of a lot more people that are scared of what happens if this doesn't stop. This is abhorrent. And then you got this. Then you got Tony Abbott. We find out that he's out there doing his awfulness. Now, it turns out he is still a terrible human being and can't articulate himself in any decent human being way. Tony Abbott has come out swinging about the voice to Parliament, saying it's the wrong principle and risks promoting separatism in Australia. Yeah, because the more we hear from Indigenous people, which you have clearly had that healthy welfare card on, which is another abuse, as if RoboDebt wasn't bad enough, we would introduce a card that restricted their money and told them what they couldn't buy. See, that's what I mean. They've got other nefarious ways of making sure that there are terrible people. And that started with good old little Tony Abbott. Let's start there. This all shows you the 30,000 feet view that I talk about. Look at what they're doing. Don't listen to what they're saying. Look at what they're saying is misdirection. It's designed to make you see what they're doing is acceptable, but what they're doing is what you should be paying attention to. Everything from the healthy welfare card to robo-debt that they plan to re-implement. They're going to find legal loopholes to do this. So we need to apply pressure to make sure this can never happen again. This is what I thought would have happened in the one on children, child abuse victims. They were all asked to sign this pledge and do this right and sort of talk about it a bit more. But I kind of feel like these things don't go far enough. We need to push them to the edge, like really, really reach in. It's time to grab them by the throat and then say, we're done with the abuse. Like, you're abusing the public now. This isn't funny. Like, you've gone too far. You've pushed people to an extreme. This Royal Commission can't end here. There needs to be criminal prosecutions for this. Alan Tudge is right. Someone should have been prosecuted for this, only not on the side that he thought. Someone needs to, like, if we don't do that, they're going to do this again. And it's the same thing I spoke about in the US stuff. If you can have a president that does whatever he wants and claim everything is rigged, it's not going to stop. It has that same feeling to it of we're never ever going to get better. But do not think that these people will ever be decent. Every time I found out today that another family member of mine is voting Conservative. This is a family, like blood, like super close blood, like so close that her blood essentially runs through mine. One of them's grandparents, another one's an aunt, a couple of siblings. Like, I shared a room with some of these people, terrible people that have decided this is acceptable. I think they're terrible people because I've explained the stance of what happens to poor people when you vote Conservative, and they do it anyway. Let alone that the one person who votes Conservative is poor, essentially, and lived like a very impoverished woman. And I learned that today, and I was like, how do I beat this? I can't even beat this within my own family. I can't, because the narrative is so strong for what we will accept. We've accepted the narrative that Peter Dutton put out there. Everyone heard that today. Oh, ALP's using this to just attack us. Therefore, we shouldn't fix anything and we should just move right along. The media will forget this. It's going to be buried, just like the Royal Commission into Child Abuse. I really thought we could have protected more people if we had kept the fire on it. But the fire burns out so quickly. So we need to get in contact with people to make sure it can't. But the LNP does do some cleanup stuff whenever it gets too far. They do this. Jared Rednick dumped from winnable spot on LNP ticket. He was too extreme. Anti-vaxxer, crazy. And yes, I'm going to use the term crazy because what he said was crazy. You can't defend him. And he was too much for them. Same as Craig Kelly. Bon voyage. Probably another Clive Palmer candidate or or One Nation, you know, because they've got to tip their hat to the most terrible people in the world. And we will accept that. This guy will still be able to run. There's nothing precluding him from running. It doesn't matter how much he's going to lie to you about vaccines. It doesn't even matter that he will openly make sure that everything that comes out of his mouth is not only untrue, but it will harm the public. Because when you look at the diseases that are prevented through getting vaccines and that they're all coming up through again, like measles and stuff, you then realize exactly how insidious this whole thing is. And he's still allowed to run free. Because apparently that's what happens in democracy. You can say the most terrible lie in the world where this will impact real communities. And yet they're like, no, it's free speech. They're allowed to say those sorts of things. Like, truth is negotiable. You know, I think that we kind of need to make a law around making truth a thing. You know, it's even if I don't like to hear what I'm hearing, even if it's by someone I don't want to hear it from. If Anthony Albanese told me a big whopper, do you think I'm going to want to, you know, let that be an acceptable thing that I walk by? No, of course not. So why should we let this be? We can't. We truly can't. We can't ignore this anymore. But they're not done. They're truly not done in being this terrible. He was only gone like Craig Kelly because the pressure becomes so big that they're like, all right, we've lost a lot, but there's a lot of election losses here. And if we keep him, we're going to get thrashed even further. Like, I think they've only got like 5 seats in Western Australia. Like, but even in like where he is in Queensland, like that particular demographic is like, no, thank you. But again, I think that there also needs to be laws around social media and being able to say these sorts of things. Like what Elon Musk did to Twitter is, it was bad. All right. So where there is a final story here, we're going to discuss LNP losses. See, I do have to leave it on a little cheery note because I do like to see when they lose. Like, I'm not even gonna pretend that I'm not biased here. There are elections going around, so the seat of Fadden is coming up, I think, next weekend, and I think by the end of year it's discussed the seat of Cook Scott Morrison's. He is trying to secure a deal, I think, in the US as some sort of right-wing talk fest of misinformation, because telling the truth is apparently not part of what the Conservatives want. Look, I'm not saying that the left doesn't lie to you, because they do. It's just, that's why I think there needs to be a law. I just think that their lies are less harmful. And I think that that's why they're not going to overly push to change that law. I think that they do things that I'm unhappy with. And I think that they all should tell you the truth. But the LNP are definitely running a little bit scared right now, hence getting rid of some of their most insidious people. So is it possible for the coalition to lose 35 seats? Now, the reason that this is going to still come up, they're never ever going to own their role in this. They're not going to say, well, maybe we should appeal to them. They don't have to. They can be as horrible as they want to in different communities, and to a certain degree that they're punished and they don't hold government, sure, for a little while, but eventually, I'm going to say it, sadly, we're too placid to sort of fight it. I'm thankful for that. This is a weird side note. I'm thankful for the Westminster system that we have. I'm not a big fan of the Queen or anything. But I know that if we had presidents and that sort of thing during the time of all of this, oh yeah, they would have made out as if everything was robbed and stolen from. America has shown me I really, really don't like how they do their democracy. Their weird gerrymandering, voter suppression, handling of things has given me, and then they go around, telling people we are the victors of giving people democracy. Every country that they've touched is worse off as a result. Every country. Hell, Syria was run 10 times better before they even went into it. Hell, women had so many more rights. They go in, no, gone. Iraq now, they're now doing talks and negotiations with the Taliban again. Seem normal to you? Look at Afghanistan. Everything that the US touches turns awful. So do not think that, look, I'm not a big fan of the Queen or how any of that works, but I think the Westminster system has prevented a lot of abuses. It could have been worse. And I'm not saying that this whole thing hasn't been horrible for us as a nation when you look at robo-debt and everything else. But we've managed to avoid what the US has. But I've always had this like weird projection that we're 5 to 10 years off where the US is, because we're like slower down under. We take our time with wrecking ourselves. Like, I think that we're so laid back that it's almost dangerous, that we're so complacent with accepting what happens here. It's like, yeah, sure, that person did do something terrible, but why don't you give him another go? That's what makes me fearful, is that we don't just chuck it out on its ear and then go, no, you can't do that. And I'm really concerned that we're going to be acclimated to thinking Peter Dutton is a okay opposition leader to have. Like, he has like 3 years to sort of make it sound like this is the norm, like we should accept what he's up to. Like, you go back to that story earlier where the ABC couldn't even tell you who they were talking to. That they were like, no, we're actually talking to Anthony Albanese, but we will put the name down as I'll show you again very quickly before I go. I'll show you. They're like, they didn't even know who they were talking to. And they accepted Peter Dutton's narrative. And then at one point, they even called Peter Dutton the Prime Minister. It was bad. It was bad. Like, I make a lot of mistakes doing this, but this is me on amateur time. These people are paid millions of dollars to like present the news, and they're like, I don't even know who I'm talking to. It's crazy, but it's a little bit worse than that, because let me show you how much worse they made it. Peter Dutton accuses the government of politicizing a report as they're talking to Anthony Albanese about the report. Like, don't correct the narrative. Just sort of say, well, this is what Peter Dutton says. I'm very disappointed in our media that something has to change. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for coming, whether you were able to view this live or whether you do this on playback. Please like, share, and subscribe. I know that my work has prevented me from doing a more deep dive. I don't think next week I have a lot on. That I'm a little bit tight on. I want more work, but I want to be able to do more content here. And I want to give you more. So I might spend up a few extra late nights. I didn't get home till like 10:30 last night, and I think I seen the kids. They were still awake, which was amazing. At like 10:30. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a bit of an early night person. Okay, I talk too much. All right, I want to thank everyone for coming, and I will see you all next week, same time. And please tell people that I am here. And the reason that I do this is so you understand what's on my mind, so you can hopefully go and think about ways of changing things. Do get in contact with your local member about making sure stuff like RoboDebt can't happen again, and that there is a Royal Commission into Rupert Murdoch. Thank you. See you next week.